It is 3:07 in the morning, the room is quiet, the lights are off, and outside the world feels completely still. Suddenly your eyes open. There is no alarm, no obvious noise, no clear reason. Yet you are awake, staring into the darkness, wondering why your body decided that this exact moment was the right time to interrupt your sleep. Most people assume something unusual must be happening when this occurs. They think perhaps their mind is stressed or something is wrong with their sleep. But before jumping to those conclusions, it helps to step back and ask a much more interesting question. What is the body actually doing during sleep in the first place? Many people imagine sleep as if the body simply shuts down, like switching off a machine. You go to bed, your brain powers down, and several hours later it powers back on. But the truth is far more fascinating. Your body does not switch off at night. In many ways, it becomes extremely active. To understand this, imagine a large city late at night. During the day, the city is full of noise, traffic, and people rushing everywhere. But at 3 in the morning, the streets appear empty. If you walk through the city at that hour, it might feel as if everything had stopped. Yet behind the scenes, the city is still working. Electric power stations are still running. Hospitals are still treating patients. Security systems are monitoring buildings. Maintenance crews are repairing roads, cleaning streets, and preparing everything for the next day. The city may look quiet on the surface, but its essential systems are still operating carefully and continuously. Your body behaves in a very similar way. While you are asleep, your brain is not resting in the way most people imagine. Instead, it is performing an enormous amount of work. Memories from the day are being sorted and stored. Chemical balances inside the brain are being adjusted. Cells throughout the body are being repaired and rebuilt. Hormones are released at very specific times, guiding different biological processes that can only happen properly while you sleep. Even your immune system becomes more active during the night, identifying and responding to potential threats inside the body. Your breathing patterns change, your heart rate shifts through different rhythms, and your brain cycles through several distinct stages of activity. In other words, sleep is not simply rest. Sleep is maintenance. It is the time when your body quietly performs the tasks that keep the entire system functioning. And sometimes during these complex processes, the brain briefly surfaces into awareness. When that happens, you open your eyes in the middle of the night and suddenly find yourself awake, even though the deeper work of sleep is still unfolding behind the scenes. Deep inside the brain, there is a tiny structure that quietly keeps time for your entire body. It is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The name sounds complicated, but the idea behind it is surprisingly simple. This structure acts like a biological clock that tells your body when to be awake and when to sleep. What makes this even more fascinating is its size. The suprachiasmatic nucleus contains only about 20,000 neurons. That might sound like a lot, but compared to the billions of neurons in the brain, it is incredibly small. Yet this tiny cluster of cells manages to coordinate many of the most important rhythms inside the human body. Scientists refer to this timing system as the circadian rhythm. The word circadian comes from Latin and means about a day. It describes the natural 24-hour cycle that regulates many processes inside the body. Your sleep, alertness, body temperature, digestion, and hormone levels all follow this daily rhythm. Imagine your body as a massive orchestra with thousands of instruments playing at the same time. If each musician played independently, the result would be chaos. But if a conductor stands at the front guiding the timing, suddenly everything becomes organized. The suprachiasmatic nucleus works like that conductor. It keeps the body's internal systems moving together in a coordinated rhythm. One of the most important signals that adjusts this internal clock is light. When sunlight enters your eyes, special cells in the retina send signals directly to the brain. These signals tell the clock what time of day it is. When morning light appears, the clock begins preparing the body for activity. As evening approaches and light fades, the clock gradually shifts the body towards sleep. This shift involves the release of a hormone known as melatonin. Melatonin is sometimes called the darkness signal. When the brain releases it, Your body temperature slowly drops, your muscles relax, and your mind begins drifting towards sleep. It is not a sleeping pill, and it does not force you to fall asleep instantly. Instead, it gently informs the body that night has arrived and it is time to begin the sleeping process. But here is the part many people misunderstand. The circadian rhythm does not simply create one long, continuous block of sleep. Instead, it organizes sleep into repeating cycles that occur throughout the night. These cycles move through several stages, each with different patterns of brain activity. Your brain gradually descends into deeper sleep, then rises again toward lighter sleep before repeating the process. On average, one full cycle lasts roughly 90 minutes. Over the course of a typical night, a person experiences several of these cycles, one after another. This means your brain naturally moves closer to wakefulness multiple times during the night. Most of the time, you never notice these brief moments because the brain quickly drifts back into sleep. But occasionally something small, a sound, a shift in temperature, a dream, or even internal brain activity pushes you slightly past that boundary. When that happens, you open your eyes in the middle of the night and suddenly become aware that you are awake. It can feel mysterious, but in reality it is often just your brain passing briefly through one of the natural turning points in the rhythm of sleep. If we want to understand why waking up in the middle of the night happens so often, we have to look more closely at the structure of sleep itself. Sleep is not one uniform state. It is a constantly changing pattern of activity inside the brain, almost like a repeating wave that rises and falls throughout the night. Scientists first began to understand this when they started measuring brain activity using a technique called electroencephalography. This method places small sensors on the scalp that detect tiny electrical signals produced by neurons. When researchers observed the brain during sleep, they discovered something surprising. Instead of becoming quiet and inactive, the brain was moving through several clearly defined stages. The first stage begins when you initially fall asleep. Your thoughts start to drift, your muscles relax, and your brain waves slow down slightly. This stage is very light, and if someone speaks your name or a sudden sound occurs, you can wake up almost immediately. Many people have experienced the strange sensation of thinking they were awake even though they had already entered this first stage of sleep. As sleep deepens, the brain moves into a second stage where the body becomes more disconnected from the outside world. Heart rate slows down, breathing becomes steady, and body temperature begins to drop. The brain starts producing patterns of electrical activity that scientists call sleep spindles and K complexes, which appear to play a role in protecting sleep from outside disturbances. After this, the brain enters a much deeper stage, often called slow wave sleep. During this period, the electrical activity in the brain becomes slower and more synchronized. Waking someone from this stage is more difficult, and if they do wake up, they may feel confused or disoriented for a few moments. This deep sleep is extremely important for physical restoration, tissue repair, and immune system function. Then something unexpected happens. Instead of continuing deeper, the brain shifts into another unique state called rapid eye movement sleep. During this stage, the brain becomes highly active again. In fact, the patterns of activity during REM sleep often look very similar to those seen when a person is awake. At the same time, the body temporarily paralyzes many of its muscles, preventing you from physically acting out your dreams. This is also the stage where the most vivid dreaming tends to occur. The brain is busy processing emotions, consolidating memories, and integrating information gathered during the day. The fascinating part is that these stages do not occur randomly. They repeat in cycles that last roughly 90 minutes. A typical night of sleep contains 4 to 6 of these cycles. Early in the night, the cycles contain longer periods of deep, slow wave sleep. Later in the night, REM sleep becomes more frequent and the overall depth of sleep becomes lighter. You can imagine this pattern like waves on the surface of the ocean. Your brain gradually sinks into deeper water and then slowly rises again toward the surface. Each time it approaches the surface, you are closer to waking. Most of the time you glide right past that point and descend back into sleep without realizing it. But sometimes the brain pauses at the surface long enough for awareness to return. When that happens, your eyes open, and you suddenly find yourself awake in the quiet darkness of the night. If we continue looking at what happens during the night, we begin to notice something interesting about the middle of the sleep period. Many people who wake up at night report that it often happens somewhere between 2 and 4 in the morning. This timing is not perfectly identical for everyone, but it appears often enough that scientists have tried to understand what makes this part of the night different from the others. Several biological processes reach important turning points around this time. One of the most noticeable changes involves body temperature. Throughout the evening, as your body prepares for sleep, your internal temperature slowly begins to drop. This cooling process helps signal the brain that it is time to rest, but the drop does not continue forever. Instead, body temperature gradually reaches its lowest point in the middle of the night, often around 3 or 4 in the morning. When a system reaches its lowest point, it also becomes slightly unstable, like a pendulum slowing down at the bottom of its swing before moving upward again. During this same period, the hormone melatonin is near its highest level. Melatonin is released by the brain in response to darkness, and it plays an important role in maintaining the sleep state. High melatonin levels encourage relaxation and help the body remain in sleep mode. However, the night is not simply a steady period of deep sleep. Even while melatonin remains high, another hormone begins slowly increasing in the background. This hormone is cortisol. Cortisol is sometimes misunderstood because people often associate it only with stress. In reality, cortisol has many important roles in the body. One of its key functions is preparing the brain and body for wakefulness. Every morning, cortisol rises naturally, helping increase alertness, blood pressure, and energy levels as the body transitions toward daytime activity. But the rise of cortisol does not start suddenly when the sun comes up. It actually begins hours earlier, quietly increasing while you are still asleep. Around the middle of the night, cortisol levels are slowly climbing from their lowest point toward the morning peak. This creates a very interesting situation inside the body. One system is still encouraging sleep, while another system has begun preparing for wakefulness. It is almost like two different biological programs overlapping for a short period of time. When two systems overlap in this way, sleep can become more delicate. Small disturbances that might not have mattered earlier in the night can now have a larger effect. A slight sound in the environment, a change in breathing, a shift in position, or even a moment of internal brain activity can nudge the brain toward wakefulness. You might think of it like balancing a pencil on its tip. When the pencil is lying flat on a table, it is stable and difficult to move. But when it stands upright on its tip, even a tiny push can cause it to fall. In the same way, the biological balance between sleep and wakefulness during the middle of the night can make the brain more sensitive to small disturbances. When that delicate balance tips slightly in the direction of wakefulness, your eyes open. You find yourself awake in the quiet hours of the night, often around 3 in the morning, not because anything has gone wrong, but because your body is passing through a natural transition within its internal rhythm. Another fascinating process begins when the brain enters deeper stages of sleep. For many years, scientists believed sleep simply allowed the brain to rest after the activities of the day. But more recent discoveries have revealed that something much more active and important is happening. While you sleep, your brain is carrying out a kind of internal cleaning process. To understand why this matters, imagine what happens in any complex system that works continuously. A factory, for example, produces useful products, but during production it also creates waste materials. If the waste is not removed regularly, the factory would slowly become clogged with debris and its machines would stop working properly. The brain faces a similar problem. Throughout the day, billions of neurons are constantly communicating with each other. They send electrical signals, release chemical messengers, and process enormous amounts of information. All of this activity produces tiny metabolic byproducts. These substances are not necessarily dangerous at first, but if they accumulate over time, they can interfere with normal brain function. For a long time, scientists wondered how the brain removed this waste. Most organs in the body rely on the lymphatic system, a network that carries away excess fluid and unwanted materials. But the brain does not contain the same kind of lymphatic vessels found elsewhere in the body. For decades, it was unclear how the brain managed its own cleanup. Eventually, researchers discovered a specialized process known as the glymphatic system. This system becomes far more active during sleep than during wakefulness. In fact, when you fall into deeper stages of sleep, spaces between brain cells expand slightly. This change allows fluid to move more freely through brain tissue. This fluid flows through the brain somewhat like water through a series of small channels. As it moves, it carries away metabolic waste products that have accumulated during the day. In a sense, the brain is rinsing itself while you sleep, removing substances that would otherwise build up between neurons. One way to picture this process is to imagine cleaning a busy kitchen at night after a long day of cooking. During the day, there is constant activity. Food preparation, cooking, washing dishes, and moving equipment around. The kitchen cannot be thoroughly cleaned while everything is in motion. Only after the activity stops can someone step in and wash the surfaces, clear away scraps, and restore order. Sleep provides the brain with that quiet period when maintenance can occur without interruption. Interestingly, the cleaning process appears to be strongest during deeper stages of sleep that occur earlier in the night. Later in the night, sleep tends to become lighter as the brain shifts toward dreaming stages and prepares for the eventual return to wakefulness. Because sleep is lighter during these later hours, the brain is also more likely to move closer to consciousness. This helps explain why waking up in the middle of the night becomes more common as morning approaches. Your brain has already completed some of its deepest maintenance work, and the overall balance of sleep stages is gradually shifting. What feels like an interruption of sleep may actually be part of a much larger system, quietly maintaining the health of the brain itself. Even after understanding the biological rhythms of sleep and the maintenance processes happening inside the brain, there is still another piece of the puzzle to consider. The human brain has a remarkable habit. It continues thinking even when you are not consciously aware of it. During the day, your attention is constantly directed outward. You look at screens, talk to people, solve problems, drive through traffic, and respond to thousands of small events. Your brain is busy processing the outside world. But when night arrives and you close your eyes, the outside world becomes quiet. Visual input fades, sounds become fewer, and physical movement slows down. Yet the brain does not suddenly stop producing thoughts. Instead, its focus gradually shifts inward. Scientists studying brain activity have identified a network that becomes particularly active during these inward-focused moments. It is known as the default mode network. This network includes several connected regions of the brain that work together when you are not concentrating on a specific external task. When the default mode network is active, the brain tends to do things like recalling memories, imagining future possibilities, replaying social interactions, and trying to understand complex emotional situations. It is the system responsible for the quiet stream of thoughts that often appears when you are daydreaming or reflecting. During sleep, parts of this network remain active, especially during lighter stages of sleep and dreaming. The brain begins sorting through experiences from the day, strengthening some memories while weakening others. Emotional events are processed and placed into a broader mental context. This process is not always smooth or silent. Sometimes the brain becomes engaged in complicated mental simulations. It may replay conversations, imagine future problems, or explore possibilities that have not yet happened. These internal activities can create vivid dreams, but they can also occasionally push the brain closer to wakefulness. Imagine a theater late at night. The stage is dark and the audience has gone home. But backstage, the crew is still working. They are adjusting lights, organizing equipment, and preparing scenes for the next performance. If someone accidentally turns on the stage lights for a moment, the empty theater suddenly becomes visible again. Something similar can happen inside the mind. When internal brain activity becomes strong enough, it can briefly illuminate consciousness. You open your eyes and suddenly find yourself fully aware, even though you had been asleep only seconds before. When this occurs in the middle of the night, the thoughts that appear can feel unusually intense. Without the distractions of daytime activity, the mind has nothing competing for attention. A single idea can seem larger and more urgent than it would during the day. A small concern about tomorrow's plans might expand into a long chain of thinking. A memory from the past may replay repeatedly. This does not necessarily mean something is wrong with the brain. It simply reflects the fact that the brain is a prediction machine. It constantly tries to simulate possibilities and prepare for future events. Waking during the night sometimes allows you to witness a brief moment of that ongoing internal process. The mind you experience during the day is only a small window into a much larger system that continues working even while you sleep. Even after looking at brain chemistry, sleep cycles, and neural activity, there is still another perspective that scientists often consider when trying to understand human sleep. That perspective comes from evolution. The human body did not develop in the modern world of electric lights, climate-controlled homes, and quiet bedrooms. For most of human history, people lived in environments that were far less predictable. Nights were darker, temperatures changed more dramatically, and the possibility of danger was always present. In that environment, sleeping deeply and continuously for many hours might not always have been the safest strategy. Some researchers have suggested that human sleep may once have followed a different pattern than the one most people expect today. Historical writings from several centuries ago describe a habit, sometimes called segmented sleep. Instead of one long block of sleep, people would often sleep in two separate periods during the night. The first period of sleep would begin shortly after darkness fell. After several hours, people would wake naturally for a short time in the middle of the night. During this quiet waking period, they might talk with family members, reflect, read by candlelight, or simply sit quietly before eventually falling asleep again for a second period of rest until morning. This pattern may sound unusual today, but it appears often enough in historical records that scientists have taken it seriously as a possible natural rhythm of human sleep. Some sleep researchers believe the body may still carry traces of this older pattern. If this idea is correct, then waking briefly during the middle of the night may not necessarily be a malfunction of the sleep system. It could simply be a small remnant of a pattern that once served a purpose in human life. Think about it from the perspective of survival. If an entire group of early humans slept deeply for 8 uninterrupted hours, they would have been completely vulnerable to predators, fires, or other dangers. But if sleep naturally included lighter phases and brief waking periods, it would create moments when people could become aware of their surroundings. Even today, many animals sleep in patterns that allow frequent brief awakenings. These awakenings help them monitor their environment while still obtaining the restorative benefits of sleep. Of course, the evolutionary explanation is not fully settled. Sleep is an extremely complex biological behavior, and scientists are still studying how different environmental factors shape it. Artificial lighting, work schedules, and social habits have dramatically changed the way humans structure their nights. The widespread use of electric light, for example, allows people to stay awake long after the sun has set, compressing the natural timing of sleep into a shorter window. Because of these changes, it can be difficult to determine what the truly natural pattern of human sleep might be under completely natural conditions. What makes this topic interesting from a scientific perspective is that sleep patterns appear surprisingly flexible. The human brain can adapt to many different schedules depending on the environment. Some people sleep best in one long block, while others naturally wake once or twice during the night before falling asleep again. In that sense, waking briefly at 3 in the morning may not be as strange as it feels. It might simply be one small glimpse into a sleep pattern shaped by thousands of years of human history. A pattern that the modern world has only partially reshaped. Even after decades of research, sleep remains one of the most mysterious biological processes scientists study. We understand many of the pieces involved, but the full picture is still incomplete. In science, there are questions where the deeper we look, the more complicated the answers become. Sleep is one of those questions. Consider something simple. Every night, you close your eyes and enter a state where your awareness of the world fades away. Your sense of self becomes blurred, and for several hours your conscious experience disappears almost completely. Yet during that time, your brain is not idle. It continues working with extraordinary precision. Neurons are communicating, memories are being reorganized, hormones are rising and falling in carefully timed patterns, and biological systems are maintaining the body in ways cannot easily happen during waking life. All of this activity unfolds quietly while the conscious mind is mostly absent, but there are still questions that remain surprisingly difficult to answer. Scientists still debate exactly why dreams exist. We know that dreaming often occurs during stages like rapid eye movement sleep, when the brain becomes highly active again, even though the body remains temporarily paralyzed. During these periods, people can experience vivid images, emotions, and stories that feel almost as real as waking life. Yet the precise function of dreaming is still not completely understood. Some researchers believe dreams help the brain process emotional experiences. Others suggest dreams help integrate memories and reinforce learning. Still others think dreams may simply be the brain's way of maintaining neural connections while the sensory world is temporarily disconnected. None of these explanations alone fully captures the complexity of what happens during dreaming. Another mystery involves why certain people wake at nearly the same time every night without any obvious external trigger. The brain's internal timing system, guided by structures like the suprachiasmatic nucleus and its regulation of the circadian rhythm, explains part of the pattern. But even this sophisticated biological clock cannot explain every detail of human sleep behavior. There are also sleep disorders that scientists still struggle to explain completely. Some individuals experience chronic insomnia even when no clear medical cause can be identified. Others fall asleep unexpectedly during the day, a condition known as narcolepsy. These conditions show that sleep is influenced by a delicate balance of neurological, chemical, and environmental factors that researchers are still trying to understand. From a scientific point of view, sleep represents one of the great unsolved puzzles of biology. Every human experiences it every night, yet its deeper mechanisms remain partially hidden. And this leads to an interesting philosophical thought. Every morning, when you wake up, your conscious experience seems continuous. You feel like the same person you were the day before. But during sleep, especially during the deepest stages, your conscious awareness disappears for hours. The sense of you is temporarily gone, yet when morning arrives, the brain reconstructs that sense of self again. Memories reconnect, identity returns, and the story of your life continues as if there had never been an interruption. This raises a subtle but powerful scientific question. If consciousness can disappear each night and then reappear again in the morning, perhaps it is not a fixed thing stored somewhere in the brain. Perhaps it is something the brain actively rebuilds again and again. From that perspective, waking in the quiet hours of the night may be a brief moment when you notice the machinery behind that process. A small window into the complex biological systems that continuously generate your experience of reality.